All right, welcome back to Equal Time Soccer. I'm Matt Pravratsky alongside Mark Pravratsky, and we are joined by one of the hottest keepers in the country, Bayliss Flynn. Bayliss, you jump in. You've been a long time sort of personality around Equal Time, but somehow have never been on for a full show, so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Somehow as if it's not up to us.
No, the blame, there's nowhere else the blame can go. Very long time followers of my women's soccer coverage might even be aware of Bayliss pre Equal Time. I just looked up the piece. I did a piece in 2018 before Equal Time launched when you, at the time, I think were 12, although we're trying to figure out how that math could be right. And it was on recruiting, and I didn't know much about the club scene at the time. I was writing about MTA, writing about the Gophers, and I think I got like several angry DMs for the way I talked about like the youth club scene, and it was officially the end of me talking about club soccer. But it was at the time I remember being blown away because I literally did a sit down interview with you and your parents at like the Edina soccer bubble or Eden Prairie or somewhere. And I
At a
met
Chuck E. Cheese.
no, it was like at one of those training facilities,
Yeah. Champions
and I
Hall.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it was there, and you were like 12 years old and super impressive, and like we don't have younger siblings. I never interact with like kids that young, and I was interviewing you, and even back then you were super impressive, and that was sort of the start of me being impressed by all these like super composed like teenagers that we happen to have on the show. But I mean, when you think like that far back, do you ever think that far back of like, oh my God, the stuff I did to try and get up to this level, to get recruited so that I could be at a place like Montana? Like, do you ever go back that far? Because I don't do it that frequently, but when like your name comes up, my brain sort of drifts back to that far back.
Yeah, I do think about the time when I was like a four-sport athlete in middle school and high school, and I'd have to go from track practice, like in the off season, right to a 3-hour basketball practice, and then get in my parents' car, drive 20 minutes to West St. Paul Dome, and just be 10 minutes early or right on time soccer practice, and then I'd get home at like 10 p.m. Yeah.
It's taking the if specializing in only one sport is one extreme, you took it the complete opposite extreme. Not only were you not specializing, I remember how insane it was back then. I think even when you started playing for Aurora when you were still a high school student, I think you were dealing with like some leg fatigue or some whatever, and I think even then you were doing like track and club soccer and Aurora all at the same time.
Yeah, so I was doing high school track, and I was doing Minnesota Thunder Academy club soccer and Aurora, and then I got a stress fracture in my foot. So
Yeah.
we-
Sounds
yeah,
Sounds right. Sounds
yeah.
right. And the only other sort of old timey story I will tell about Bayliss is when Bayliss first got signed by Aurora that first year. I was running the soccer side that first year, and I had to have like 3 different conversations with the athletic director at Edina High School because everything about Aurora at the time was so shiny and so glitzy, and a lot of TV and general media stories about the team called them pro. And so this high school athletic director was like really stressed out, and was I had to really convince him of like, no, this is amateur. I know we're signing pro players. I know this story by whatever TV station said professional, but I promise she's not getting paid. I had to have so many conversations with him just because you were still going to be going back to Edina High School, which is like a very successful high school program, and he and I were both very nervous about not ruining your high school eligibility.
Yeah, I didn't even know that you had conversations with them. That's hilarious. Yeah. So when I was in my first and second seasons with Aurora, I would go to practice in the morning
Uh-huh.
till like 10, and then I somehow configured my class schedule, and I would zoom home, take a quick shower, and then go to class.
Yeah, it's oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't. I mean, I think there was like a moment during that early training where like you got your driver's license and the teammates were all happy for you or something, just like crazy stuff.
Yeah,
It
or
was
like I think I graduated, and then they all lifted
yeah,
me on their shoulders, and it was
you
hilarious.
yeah, you and the Raps and Shelly Hope yeah or something all like getting your graduation gowns the same week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's jump into Montana. So you start this fall. Montana, for those who don't follow, has been sort of a perennial Big Sky powerhouse. You know, the Gophers have Cam Zoo, who started their career out at Montana, for folks who need like a random transfer portal connection. You ended up there and have been doing, a ton of cool stuff outside of soccer. Then this fall, you start the season in that keeper group. The starting keeper actually goes down, has like a hand injury, which, hands are somewhat important in the keeping game. You jump in out of nowhere and have just been absolutely on fire. We actually scheduled the show before it came out. Right after we scheduled it, you won Big Sky Defensive Player of the Week honors, which is so rad. Your save percentage is just absolutely ridiculous right now. It's like 89.3%, which is just disgusting. You are someone that loves to sort of play with your feet, play in possession, but all of a sudden you have to jump into this starting spot. What was it like for you to all of a sudden jump in and be like, okay, I have to go 90, I have to be ready after sort of several games of not being out there?
Yeah, so last year we had 4 goalkeepers, and the situation just looked completely different. So I was obviously a bench player, not going to get in, didn't think I would get in. And then this spring we had 1 girl quit. This summer we had another. So then we were left with 2 this fall, Ashlyn and myself. And, Ashlyn started the first 5-ish games, I believe. She got her hand stepped on. She broke it, which was so unfortunate. She's a tremendous goalkeeper. And then out of nowhere, I have to come in and play, and I was excited and I was ready, and I've been training for a very long time for this, and I've seen myself improve a lot over the course of the past year or 2. And my coach, Jay Landham, he was probably the biggest reason why my save percentage is what it is now. Worked on a strategy because of my height. I'm probably 5'3" to 5'5" range. I won't admit where.
2-inch range. She's somewhere in there. So I'm anywhere from 5'11" to 6'2".
Yeah. So we're working on a back set to get myself on my line in that 24 to 32 yard range away from the net, and that's meant those dipping balls from going over my head, and that's been able to make a lot of my saves.
Yeah, I think he is likely the one who had like a tweet about that or some post about that. And I saw the same thing because I regularly, and I'm sure Mark is giving me shit for this, I regularly, when I see shots go in, I've stopped trying to give takes on like how savable some of these shots have been, because sometimes there'll be times where I'm like, it felt like that ball was within arm's reach, but it went over, or even if there's a taller keeper, there really, if you're tall enough, there really isn't sort of an over your head space, like if you're in position. But one thing your coach, like you just mentioned, pointed out, even like posting about it publicly, is, well, the save might end up looking easier than it actually was, because a lot of the work goes into the positioning and all the stuff you just mentioned, which is, you make it look like a savable ball by being in a savable position, but what makes it maybe less savable is if you get yourself caught out of position. But have you as a keeper always struggled with that, of like people perceiving what's easy and hard when a random like shitty field player like me or Mark or whatever tries to gauge what a keeper's doing? Have you
I was also a shitty keeper. I was outfield and in the goal shitty.
True. That's true. Mark, that's true. But have you always struggled with that, of like even the rest of the team not even perceiving things the same way you experience it as a keeper?
A little bit, yeah. So we've had about 3 field players train as backups this fall. So if I go down, they can go in.
Yeah.
After those sessions, they're like, wow, I have a lot more admiration for the goalkeeper position. I'm like, thank you. Maybe we should have all the field players trained. Maybe just once. Yeah.
It's like working in the service industry. Everyone has to rotate through. How did you are kind of specifically experienced in this kind of in the last few years in terms of being a backup keeper? All keepers have to deal with it at some point. But you, at the same time, you of course were starring in high school and club, but you got the experience at Aurora first of being a backup, and especially that first year, I'm sure you purely knew it, right? You were by far the youngest player, and so maybe it wasn't so hard to transition, but you had to play other years at Aurora where you were back, and then you eventually got some chances this summer. How did you grow from that? And also, I'm sure, I would think some of those things just benefit you in life, learning that patience, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a learning experience. It's knowing what your role is on the team and how you can best support your teammates. And maybe that's cheering from the bench and just being a support in that support role. But it's also if someone gets injured, you're able to go in, or if someone's missing, then you can go in. And so it's that mindset that can easily shift game to game.
Yeah. Well, and
how
even
did it switch? What? Sorry, man. So like contrasting. It was now the quick transition because you have no time to dwell on how you're a supportive like backup. You have the mindset of I'm the number one. Especially you're like if there's no one even you're the only one. So you had to shift that. And how has that changed? And how have you noticed that change, or how have you tried to make your mindset change in the last few weeks? Because it's a totally different role now.
Because I've experienced that starter role in club in high school and then that bench role with Aurora and other teams, I think that's what made this transition the easiest. And just gaining confidence by those little training moments in practice is what is going to boost my confidence a lot. And on my water bottle, I will write little messages like confidence, it's okay, shake it off, that kind of stuff. And that's just, it's going to help me get in my mindset.
Nice.
Yeah, I regularly, when I'm talking to keepers, I'm sort of blown away with like the amount of, we already try to really highlight just how hard like high level women's college soccer is, like the stress, like the emotional stress, the mental stress. Even like if you have a dedicated role, like a set role, like it's really hard, let alone when you don't have a role you expect yourself to have, or you don't have one you think you've earned or whatever. And then that's in general. And then being a keeper, it personally to me feels like it would be an added layer of isolation just because of what the position is, because there's only one spot. And so like, you know, if you're a good winger, but you're not able to play, you might be able to find yourself playing outside back or whatever. When you're a keeper, it's like, well, no, this is so singular and it's so individual. And there's a huge difference, like Mark kind of mentioned, between going into the Aurora experience where, you know, you're by far the youngest keeper there. You sort of know, like probably Nicole said to you, like, hey, we'd love for you to be in training. We think you have a lot of potential. We'll probably get you some minutes, but you sort of know what your role is, versus when you go into college, basically everyone goes in kind of wanting to compete for that spot, or, you know, going in to have a chance to compete for that spot. That whiplash of, because you went in last year, you're not playing. This year, beginning of the season, you're not playing. That happens to plenty of players, by the way, but that you're sitting in that position. That's such a whiplash, I would think, to go from like grappling day by day with how hard it could be. Like, I think, you know, it's good to be a good teammate and you want to be a good teammate externally, but internally, like, can you talk about just the challenge that really is to sort of go in and all of a sudden being like, I competed, I tried my best, the coaches went a different direction, and yes, externally I'm going to be a good teammate, but also internally you still have to grapple with all of that stuff.
Yeah. I would say it's that going into Aurora, I was definitely in a space where this is training for college. This is what's preparing me for college. Because I didn't know what that environment would be like.
Right.
Obviously, you don't when you're in high school. So it was using that experience now in this season and my past season at the University of Montana, just to be flexible. It's all, and I have a very open mindset, and I think that's helping me in this situation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know when I talked to you over the summer, you also said, you know, part of the whole experience of being a college athlete is all the stuff outside of soccer too, like all the cool stuff you're doing with like the student journalism stuff out there, like when you had your podcast about like the dining hall, I listened to it, you know, like all of your like fun like stuff out there. I gotta
listen to that.
It's also just a really cool campus. I mean, anyone from Minnesota, or at least I'll speak for myself, you see these stadiums where it's like the background is literally a mountain range, or, you know, like the campus is literally intermixed, like near a mountain range. What's it been like for you sort of settling in there, just like as a human being of like, this is a new part of my life. I'm in a new place. You know, I've lived in Minnesota forever. Now I'm in Montana, and now I'm setting up sort of a new stage of like getting to be yourself out there on campus.
Yeah. So the moment I came on my official visit, I knew that I really wanted to be here, and I've really fallen in love with the mountains. I love my roommates. I've made such good friends. We go on camping trips in Glacier. We've done that a couple times. We've, you know, done road trips to Banff. So there really was no difficult transition period. And I'm also an only child, so I'm not exactly used to sharing, but it wasn't difficult at all to transition to that, you know, college dorm life at all. Yeah.
What's your favorite part? I mean, the outdoors, obviously, but then like maybe what else has surprised you about being it's Billings, right? You're in Billings.
Missoula.
Missoula. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Gonna get roasted. Montana State fans are gonna come into our mentions.
I'm just mixing up all my Montana schools.
Yeah, well, the food scene is just amazing here, and I'm a bit of a foodie, so I love going out to eat here. The downtown is the perfect size, not too big, not too little, and there's great thrifting as well that I feel people don't always know about.
Yeah.
There we go. Well, I think you maybe even have said, I can't remember if you said out loud or only to me, or somehow I got this message when you sort of half jokingly were like, well, yeah, I might work in journalism. I'm not going to work in political journalism. For those who don't know, Bayliss's mom, Mary LaHammer, is longtime TPT reporter. Your grandpa was a longtime journalist, in the Minnesota political scene. But let's just say hypothetically, you had the chance to work in like sports journalism, Bayliss, like for a very independent boutique, like innovative, fun outlet, like based in the Midwest. I mean, it pays really well, obviously, but would you ever have interest in doing like sports stuff, like trying to work in the soccer space or just sports journalism in general?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of the story ideas and pitches that I come up with end up being sports stories just because that's what I'm involved with every single day at the university.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a challenge because obviously there's kind of conflict of interest. It's always like, this really good story, I guess I'll give it to you.
Yeah. I remember even your dining hall story. I think like one of your teammates or somebody, like you interviewed them and I was just like smirking to myself about how great it was. But it's legitimately, it's like, yeah, you're student experience, baby. Of course. Well, and you're just about to head into Big Sky conference play. I think you have one final non-conference test against Boise State, which is they've been a quality program the last few years. Your former Aurora teammate, Morgan Stone came from there. They're not conference foes for you guys, but sort of a vaguely nearby mountain foe. But what's it been like for you sort of getting into a rhythm now as a team? How are you all feeling? Obviously in a conference like Big Sky, and any conference, but Big Sky in particular, you really need to sort of win that conference tournament to make it into the NCAA. So this is really the start of the real meat of the season. But how's it feeling for you guys as a team and just competitively as you go into your last non-conference test?
Yeah, so we had some great other tests against Mountain West conference teams. We played Air Force 0-0, and we also tied Wyoming. And those are good tests to it was a wake-up call for what we needed to shift formations, and that's what we did for North Dakota, and we ended up winning 4-0, and that was just such a display of dominance.
Yeah.
And we got comfortable in that new formation. It exposes us a little bit, but that's okay. I like to be off my line and come get things, so I'm having fun with it. Ready.
Yeah, you like doing your sweeper keeper shit. You get out there and get nuts for sure. I'm curious. When you mentioned that 4-0 win against North Dakota, for equal time followers, maybe on paper you would say Montana's been really strong. A result like that is like maybe even predicted, but you still have to go out there and earn it. I mean, the Gophers only beat NDSU 1-0. Like, these non-conference games are all really tough. And you mentioned the Wyoming one. I talked to the Wyoming coach a few years back when she came to Minnesota for a non-conference game, and I didn't realize how much of a home field advantage Wyoming has historically because of that altitude. And I'm curious for you, did it feel that wild for you, or are you also kind of at an altitude where it's not that big of an adjustment? Was it a big feeling going and playing at Wyoming?
So we are at altitude in Missoula, but before we played Wyoming, we went to Air Force. Their field is literally in the mountains.
Yeah.
That was high, and in the warm-ups, I was like, oh, God, I do feel this. Yeah, and then Wyoming, it was the same. It was even a little bit higher at Wyoming, I believe, but I mean, my position, I'm not running as much, so I'm sure the field players felt it more than I did.
Yeah, there was, I can't remember if it was a different coach or someone else. After I was doing prep for the game, or even when I broadcast the game, one coach sort of gave me a helpful tip. They're like, hey, by the way, make sure you look at like the road home splits for Wyoming, because Wyoming will regularly schedule like a really good non-conference slate, but maybe they'll like really try and home load it, and so they'll regularly come into conference play sort of like riding super high because they sort of know how to play to that advantage. So it's always anytime, because in the Summit League, I guess Denver would be the altitude one, but like the Midwest teams we cover, it's just never really that big of a thing. So I can't imagine being in a place where like your trips are nuts in the Big Sky. I mean, like you do what, like Sacramento, Portland, like you're all over the place.
We are northern Arizona, northern Colorado, Weber State, Idaho State, Idaho. Yeah, we're all over.
Yeah, that's wild.
What are your memories of being, you were the first high schooler to get an NIL deal. Matt talked about working out the stuff with the high school league. That obviously kind of opened it up to like we ended up having localized rules get passed and partially maybe motivated. I don't know if it was motivated by you, but you got the first NIL deal. What do you remember about that? It's all over when you Google Bayliss Flynn, there's just tons of coverage of that. So that sticks with you, Bayliss.
It really did. It was a long process getting there, approving it through Aurora and through the high school league. But I'm working with True Stone Financial, founding sponsor of Aurora, and I am so grateful that they reached out after we had our Mall of America jersey kit reveal, and they wanted to work with me and two others on the team. So after about a year, we finally got to do the promotional work, and we were on billboards, we did commercials. I had a press conference when I signed, and that was a lot. That was fun. It was a great experience, and we're now doing like more social media posts for them, and we re-signed last summer, so it's been 2 summers of working with True Stone.
That's really cool though, that like to see it begin. And I think you even gave a really good answer. I just watched like a quick TV interview from the time, and you said, you know, when people become D1 athletes and professional athletes, it's part of their world. And so this is just a way in which we can be better prepared to handle those situations. You know, especially now it's more and more realistic that you'd have a path like that to be a pro player. You're so media trained now, like you guys have done the Aurora training. You're so good at just presenting in public. So I don't know if you want any space to present to any Missoula, not Billings, Missoula businesses that you love. What type of businesses, you know, who would you want to get an NIL deal from?
Yeah, who are we pitching, Bayliss?
Get a restaurant deal just to eat for free. We can include money too, by the way. It's not just product. Bayliss is a value add business.
She's a proven entity. It can be cash plus product for sure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's this resort 30 minutes away from the university. It's called Pause Up. It's like 37,000 acres and like many, like hundreds of cabins, and they have buffalo and horses, and it's $4,000 a night. I would love an NIL deal with Pause Up, so I will take that. But our team works with Surf Missoula, a local soccer club. So we get paid, I think, $600 for 15 hours of work, and we go to practices, we help coach, we go to local elementary schools and work with the gym classes for people who can't always afford play club soccer.
Yeah, and that's cool.
Yeah, we also have a collective, Good Old Days, so that's our university's collective, and we get paid for social media posts.
Awesome.
That's sweet.
Yeah, really developing. We would always ask when it first came out, and that sounds more sophisticated than a lot of the other kind of smaller, relatively like mid-major programs. You know, even Minnesota's is with our soccer. It's pretty limited. You know, it's direct from product, right? But yeah,
it's more recent for sure. I mean, I think Mark was good at always just asking players that question really early on, and it felt like for the first like 5 or 10 shows, he was like introducing the idea to the player. Like they had never thought about it. Like especially the NSIC schools are the random ones where you really are a college town. It's like, hey, if you're the star forward on like the Mankato team, it's like, hey, go get it. Go to that. By the way, we are going to tag that sweet resort.
That's a good answer. Bayliss has done photography. She can do action shots. She can wear Western wear. I'm sure she's gotten into cowboy boots and cowboy hats.
6 pairs. So, yeah.
6? Damn. Yeah, you're Montana as hell. Did they call you a poser?
Not yet. They will.
Being from Minnesota is like, at least you're a country-ish state. Like maybe you get a little bit of credit. You're not from the coast.
It's northern.
Yeah, I think Missoula is pretty similar to Minnesota. Different, smaller Montanan towns, I'd say different, but
yeah, There's some towns like that in Minnesota, Bayliss. Trust me, I have called them for politics. So yeah, we got some countryness like they do as well.
Mark and I can't even go to our hometown of 1,000 people with any hometown credit anymore. We get looked at as out of towner. So don't worry.
I'd be a city boy for sure. Yeah. Well, Bayliss, how much do you want for people who want to stay in touch, like with what you're doing? Obviously, you're doing things for in terms of journalism at school, but in terms of just staying in touch with you, following the team, how should people stay in touch with what you have going on?
Yeah, so on Twitter and Instagram, it's just at Bayliss Flynn. And I also work for the Montana Kaimin, the student newspaper. So we have a website, and I'm also working on the Kaimin Cast. So that podcast is available on any podcasting site, Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Amazing.
That's
awesome.
Great. Well, Bayliss Flynn, long time subject of my women's soccer coverage. First full-time appearance, won't be the last. Congrats to you on the starting rollout of Montana, and go Grizz.
Thank you so much for having me. Go Grizz.
Thank you. All right. So yeah, like I said, she's so professional, like ready to give an interview. I love getting the insight. There's kind of now we got a little growing collective of these keepers from Minnesota who are all getting all these starts. She joins a group. It's a core group. It's kind of like 6-7 people.
Yeah. Well, and she talked about, before we started the show, she mentioned, all these Minnesota keepers also really grew up training together. Like she grew up training with Chloe Olson, who plays at Marquette, Claire Gagne, a little bit older, now at UNC, and absolutely crushing it there. Crushed it for Brown before that. Mm-hmm. I think she trained with like Olivia Groutman, Lowe, like multiple keepers who have all been in the game still. And so, yeah, super impressive. And I can't say enough about how nuts it would be to be like a high level college keeper. Like I cannot believe what these players go through, like mentally and emotionally. And so to have that yo-yo of like being on the bench, someone else is the 90-minute starter, and then you just have to jump in. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah. Cool to hear from Bayliss. Let's dig into the Gophers a little bit, Matt. They are on a high point right now. They've been competitive over the last few years, but this is a peak in terms of just, getting the RPI came out for the first time, or the most recent, I should say, came out. 27th in the RPI, not a place. Gophers don't get up that high. Yes, it's only early in the season, but it caught my eye, and I saw like the Star Tribune wrote a piece about the Gophers' success last weekend. Talk about last weekend's wins, because they were close, but important to stay undefeated.
Yeah, they do sort of an awkward split with the way conference play worked this year. College soccer in general for D1s allowed games a week earlier. And I don't know if that's the sole reason, but it ended up being that conference play starts while non-conference is still going on. So they went to Illinois, end up pulling off a win, sort of a tough, grinded out game. Head coach Aaron Chastain said, they weren't necessarily playing their best, which you'd expect. They were scoreless deep into the match, eventually earn a legit PK opportunity. Bowman buries it. They get that road win, which is sort of huge, just because even though a tie still would have been quality road points, anytime you can pull off a win instead of a tie, it's like, I know the point difference is only 1-3, but really that's just like make or break for your season. Any wins you drop are just lead weights on your RPI. They're lead weight on your overall chances. So huge result for them. I actually had to miss the Sunday NDSU game, so I wasn't there calling it, but watching it from home. NDSU, by the way, credit to the Bison. They literally controlled the game for the first 10 minutes. Not hyperbole, not me giving them props for props' sake. They were running the game for 5 to 10 minutes, which is absolutely nuts, and really a huge credit to them. They clearly had a game plan. They ran it well. The players were super locked in. And then even after that first 10 minutes, when the Gophers sort of maybe took control of the bulk of run of play, still held it to a 1-0 game, which for NDSU is just a huge like moral victory. I mean, I think they deserve credit for keeping it that tight. Traditionally, when a Summit League school plays a team like Minnesota, you see that gap develop towards the end of the game because of maybe the athleticism or the physical tools. NDSU never let it get out of hand. But Minnesota pulled off, again, it wasn't necessarily a highlight reel. They only got the one goal, but those wins are what's driven that RPI rating. Should mention also the RPI calculation got adjusted this year. It hasn't really been detailed how it got tweaked, but there's been some early sort of speculation about how this first RPI list looks a little bit wonky to some folks. But the main thing to take away that I've seen just from looking at the list is it is heavily rating those wins. And so when you're able to rack up those wins, aside from the quality of opponent, it's just going to drive that up. And Minnesota has had, I think, a pretty solid non-conference schedule. I've seen others criticize it, but I think it's been a pretty solid non-conference slate. So, yeah, really impressive to see them at 27 in that first RPI rating.
Yeah. I mean, in the new Big Ten, it's just tighter margins. I mean, it already had been tough sometimes for the Gophers to get into the tournament. So, yeah, this is a tougher year. They're stepping it up. So far, it's fun to watch. That Illinois game was scrappy. It was tough. But, grinding through the results is how teams make seasons that stand out. You need a little bit of that. Talk about your scorecard kind of for success. You have metrics. You're saying, if the Gophers are to be the team they want to be, this is how you could see it happen. Talk about update on how the Gophers are looking in your parameters.
Yeah, after doing season previews so many years in a row, I just try and find a different way to talk about the same team and basically the same roster. And this year I broke it down saying, listen, they got picked 14th in the coaches poll. I think that's too low. But I tried to put some metrics around, like, what will it look like if they beat that expectation? Like, if it's optimistic, sunshine and rainbows, things click into place, what are some things that likely were true that led to them outperforming that? And essentially the ones I threw out there were just the idea that the forward line would be productive. We have not had a productive forward line in years for the Gophers. Almost all the offensive production has been coming from the midfield, or in that season when Gabby Cesaroni was here, the back line. So they have been absolutely crushing it. Kaya Harper and Caroline Birdsell have 10 of the team's 16 goals. They're on pace to well beat my sort of rough 15 goals mark that I just threw out there. For context for folks, the leading scorer for the Gophers the last several years has always had 6 goals. Kaya Harper already has 9. So just for folks to have an appreciation for how unique this is. Talked about corner kicks being more consistent and dangerous. I wouldn't necessarily call them consistent in the sense that they're always doing a consistent, dangerous thing each time. Like, the service has looked very different. Multiple players are taking them. Even when they've scored, 4 out of their 16 goals have come off corners. It never has really looked the same corner to corner. But I would argue that sort of getting the goals however you get them is just as important as sort of the setup being consistent. So I think they've been solid on that. I gave that about a B just because the service still isn't really driven enough. They're not really giving the runners a chance to score as well as they could. Defense matching. The defense has never been the problem with the Gophers squad. They've always sort of given up a goal a game or less. They're doing that again. I think that's been outstanding, especially considering a center back got injured in game 2 and Kate Childers has just been a center back now. Like, okay. And there's just a first-time starter, Sarah Martin, who won that goal in camp, that role in camp, and now is just a good starting keeper. Like, okay, like that. Those are not things you can just expect from a brand new starter and player. And both of them have been looking good. The whole defense has been looking good. Offensive production, they've been scoring more than 2 goals a game, so that's a big time A. Multiple first-time rotation players. Already mentioned Sarah Martin. Ashley Turk at right back has been just so rock solid from minute 1. She's one of those 90-minute players you mentioned in the D1 roundup. But tons of young players are getting minutes for the Gophers, and I don't think it's been we have not seen that so far in the Erin Chastain era, and I think it does mark a turning point of she is throwing them into the deep end. I talked to her yesterday during media availability. Even during tight games, Avery Petty's getting out there, Erin Gabriel's getting out there, Kendall Stadden is getting out there, and I shouted her out for the improvement she's shown from last year to this year. Taylor Heimerl's getting to play on the wing now after seeing some outside back minutes last year. So a lot of first-time rotation members really doing a good job, and then winning all the should-win games. They're 7-0-1, so obviously they've been doing that. They only dropped points to Brown. I saw someone sort of rate Brown poorly. I will just tell you, if you watch that game, I thought Brown played great. made Minnesota uncomfortable the entire time. I find it hard to believe they won't be competitive in the Ivy League, but yeah, in general, I think it's gone about as well as you could hope through non-conference play. And I think the eye test also tells you it's not just sort of non-conference fluff. That's my read on this team. But that first test to see how true that is will be this weekend, obviously.
Yeah, no, I liked I mean, even though Brown made it tough, I still liked, and that wasn't the game that the Gophers showed particularly well. I liked seeing the bits that they had. They just weren't putting it all together that game, but it was, I can see the potential, and it's exciting, especially as you could say maybe the level goes up in opponents this weekend. What are your expectations for this weekend's games?
Yeah, well, the only other thing about Brown that I'll mention when you mention having to play against them, Brown ran a really aggressive press, like an incredibly aggressive press.
Yeah,
and that's
subbed a decent amount.
And they had athletes, baby. Like they could play, like they were running. And so I think that's a good thing. It's a good game to have to play, because when you play against an Iowa that can throw numbers forward, when you play against a Nebraska, these teams could also come and press the shit out of you. And I think having to play through it is valuable. In terms of this weekend, tomorrow night against Michigan, Thursday night, is as close as Minnesota gets to sort of a very winnable home game in Big Ten play. Michigan has had a tough start. They have the worst goal differential in the conference so far. They've had a decently hard schedule, but still, I think Minnesota should very much be holding themselves to like a multiple goal win. That should be their marker in this. And then right on the heels of that, they have like probably their hardest test of the year. They have to go to Madison. They play at Wisconsin. I think Trenton Gaultier, the comms staffer for the U, was at the media avail. I think he mentioned the Gophers haven't beat Wisconsin in like a decade, or maybe it was at Wisconsin they haven't won in like a decade. A huge game either way. Just a mountain of really impressive Minnesotans on that Badger team. Ishag, Adringa, so many others that I'm forgetting. Matty Poor, all these longtime contributors. So that'll be a huge test. I would expect them to win on Thursday. And then I think Sunday is basically the moment where they get to send a signal to the rest of the Big Ten about how serious they are. If they drop it, I don't think it's the end of the world, but I think it would deflate sort of that expectation a little bit. If they're able to come away with sort of any points from that road game at Wisconsin, I think they're sort of signaling that they're going to be a problem for the rest of the Big Ten slate.
Yeah, I am going to be paying attention to that game for sure on Sunday. We also have some D2 games I'm going to mention. Matt, I wanted to say I think your house looks really cool. Where'd you get that house, man?
Let's give a shout out, baby, to Pence Homes. They are a long time supporter of Equal Time Soccer. They are what make a lot of our coverage possible. Nate Pence and Lydia are a really fantastic real estate team to work with. If you're looking to buy and sell a house, if you're looking to finance or remodel, they have a preferred lender in Angie Shear, who was really helpful for my wife and I to work with, answered our dumb questions with a lot of patience and was super helpful for us. And so they're a fantastic team for you to work with. Even if you're not in Minnesota, they can help get referrals for you. They do business all across the state, rural communities, exurban communities, suburban communities, folks like us who live in Midway St. Paul. They serve all different types of sort of home searches. So give them some love. Use them if you're doing a house hunt. And then also, I'm going to shout this out. I'm going wild card on this. I have two solar companies that I can very strongly refer. Neither of them came on as sponsors, but I'm telling you right now, they do give referrals. If you want to support us, and you aren't a patron, but you want to support us in some way, get a bid from either All Energy Solar or True North Solar if you want to go solar on your house, because it's free to get those bids. And I know both of the owners of these businesses. I know their staff. They are locally based. You can trust them to do good work. And so if you're even remotely considering going solar, this is a new random way for you to support Equal Time. Get a bid from either All Energy Solar or True North and say that you came from me. And they literally give a bonus if you end up going solar. So wild card. Get nuts.
I love it, Matt. We're gonna dig into NSIC. I'm gonna let you know. I got a mid show. This is the complicated life I live.
Yeah.
I'm gonna open the bar at 2, so we have 15 minutes, which is fine.
Let's do it.
But so we'll be efficient with the NSIC and then some quick hits at the end.
Yeah, let's jump into NSIC. We've seen a decent amount of non-conference play from the NSIC teams, and we're getting inching closer now this week heading into conference play, which is a huge big step. Mark, who's ranked in the most central region poll of our Minnesota or our NSIC squads?
Yeah, no huge surprises on who's ranked in the initial rankings. For people who know, it's our conference and then a few other conferences to the east of us, for the most part, in terms of like teams in Michigan, teams in Ohio. And so it's grouped by the same folks who will be competing against our local squads to make the NCAA tournament. So it's when one team makes it automatically. This is all, most people watching know this, but the other teams are determined by how the coaches and people rank them. So number 3 in the Central Regions, Minnesota State. Number 4, Concordia St. Paul. Number 7, Bemidji State, and number 9, St. Cloud. So no huge surprises. They are the teams that typically schedule the hardest non-conference slates, and then also get results. Even if we didn't see so many huge non-conference results, which we could touch on later, but those are the people who try the best in terms of getting a challenge.
Yeah. Well, and Mary, we mentioned I think I posted on social media, Mary beat Emporia, which is, there's been a few of those sort of marquee non-conference wins that we've seen. St. Cloud taking one of the Michigan teams, Mankato beating Central Missouri,
Mankato beat Emporia State. They lost 1-0 to Central Missouri, number 4. And then, St. Cloud beat a couple of the teams from the GLIAC, not necessarily powers, but, Roosevelt, UW Parkside. So,
one of the Northern, I forget if it was Northern or Eastern, but they beat one of last year's NCAA tournament teams for sure. Yeah. And then Crookston is, maybe their record isn't standing out, but they are being super stout in the back. Talk about the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, well, I mean, just to say it plainly, they improved on last year's record already. So they didn't win or draw last year. They got a draw this year. And even more encouraging is the trend. So they had a 0-1 loss, to start the year. They had a 0-1 loss, and then they got the draw against Black Hills State, which they hadn't had a shutout. They hadn't even had a shutout since 2021. Yeah. So, it was a big deal for them, and it is a really good trend. One of the things attributed to it, at least from on the Crookston program themselves, is assistant coach Morgan Philibert, who recruited 11 newcomers. So there are plenty of people seeing action. It's kind of a split squad. There's only 2 juniors. So there's a few seniors, and then I think they're just trying to get a bit of a culture change. And of course, just getting any positive results is good. And I will say too, credit to Crookston, an exhibition to start the season, ambitious one. They played at North Dakota at UND. UND, not a huge power, but a huge challenge for Crookston, who, they're at the bottom end of the Northern Sun. So they only lost 0-3 to UND, which I think had to have given them a bit of confidence. And then obviously the defensive prowess, someone standing out, Jordan Metz, the keeper of the week last week. And then another senior keeper who played the end of the game is Emma Stampion. She's from Plymouth. Jordan Metz is from Lino Lake. So good shine for them. Very cool for the Crookston team to get a player recognized like that. And you need little steps like that to, move the program up.
Yeah, for sure. Other than the Golden Eagles, what are some sort of standout statistical performances in that non-conference?
Yeah, I mean, part of it was that a lot of the teams didn't necessarily light it up, and part of it is they had decent challenges. Yeah. But some of the things that stood out were Rachel Gensch of UMary has 2 goals and 3 assists in 3 games. People have played 2 to 4 games, so the stats is only so much. But the few things that stood out like that, Katrina Bartelt had 3 goals last weekend, and a 1-0 win and a 2-1 win, I think. Sammy Ponsby at Concordia has 2 goals at both game winners. Abigail Williams at Winona, 2 goals in 2 games, and Kristen Schuster, 3 assists in 4 games. We'll get a little bit more of the defensive highlights the next time we talk NSIC, but yeah,
and an absolute ton of cool games this weekend from the NSIC as they start conference play. What are some that you would sort of shout out if people want to pull them up and just throw on a game?
Yeah, I think they kind of stand out in terms of the two biggest ones, one on Friday, Mankato hosting Concordia, St. Paul. So I'd say that's the biggest game of the opening weekend. Concordia got a little love with the national ranking too for their solid non-conference. So huge matchup in Mankato. And then on Sunday, St. Cloud State hosts Bemidji State. So this is almost like if you were scheduling, if they were scheduling a league for TV, you're picking the best appealing matches. And then one other one is for people, the next game for people to watch in the cities I wanted to shout out is coming up the weekend of the 27th. Concordia St. Paul will be hosting Northern State, and then they're hosting Minnesota State Moorhead on Sunday. So for people who are kind of looking out, when are we going to be able to watch these games? The 27th is the first time we have it directly in the metro here.
Yeah. Well, and I think St. Cloud plays at Duluth on Friday too. So it's like those are crazy big games. Like the Concordia Mankato, St. Cloud Bemidji, St. Cloud Duluth, like these are ranking bending games. Like you literally, we will be talking about these 6 weeks from now when the final standings come down. Like these games will dictate like who makes it into these rankings. Like it's going to be nuts. Yeah.
It shapes. Well, and like the next thing I want to hit is, I mean, the way your schedule is laid out can so affect what type of rhythm you can get in a season. So I was looking at St. Cloud in specific, and other people have trends like this too. Like I noticed, like Crookston, for example, before I get into St. Cloud, they end with Mankato, Concordia, and Augie or something like that. But you're like, for them, a team that's just trying to like grow in the year. It's like, well, maybe it is better to have all of the games we could get something more out of, and then just have those end challenges as kind of a fun challenge.
Well, and play spoiler. It's like, listen, if they likely will have nothing to lose at that point, or at least it's possible they'll have nothing to lose. And like you said, you either have to play them at the beginning or the end. Like you are going to have to face them. So it's going to be tough either way.
Yeah. But St. Cloud, for example, and I wonder, I'd be curious when if we connect with their coaches, what they think about this, or the players, if they prefer it this way or the other way. 6 of their first 7 games are against people who made the NSIC tournament last year.
Yeah. So that's wild.
They're playing Bemidji, Augustana, Concordia, UMary, UMD, and Minnesota State Mankato. Included in it is Wayne State. So a game you'd expect to win, but never easy. So they're going to have to come through that relatively unscathed. But then, it really does lay it out for them. Like the second half, all you have to do, you don't have to win the NSIC. I'm sure their biggest goal is to maybe win a game in the NCAAs. I don't know, but it's to progress more there. So this could really give them the space to have a solid momentum. The only difference is, maybe you'd like to have some tough challenges, but it's interesting to see.
The only thing to remind folks of is, like you said at the beginning, it's that the D2 level is much more regionalized than D1. And so that central region poll, we will point to that central region poll more for D2. I never post the regional D1 polls because it doesn't actually, I don't think it means literally anything. And so, but in D2, it matters because that literally is who makes the NCAA tournament. It is based on the region. And so, like, these games matter because, like you said, yes, winning the regular season championship is great, and it was historic for St. Cloud to do it, but making the NCAA tournament is based on that regional poll. And so even every additional game you win in the conference tournament, every quality result, like every one of those adds up because it's those 3 regional conferences where it's the NSIC, and then I think it's sort of 2 of them are the powerhouses, and then there's a third one.
There's a they're named really similarly.
No, they're in a separate region actually. So the central is like NSIC, the one with Central Missouri and like Washburn and whoever. Those are the 2 powers, and so it's like you have to get these results, otherwise you're going to get screwed at the end. But man, these games are all going to be just nuts. Like and like we had Anna Tobias on last year. It's like they literally can start their ring season spoil it. Like if they can take down St. Cloud, like that is the start of their like ring season run.
Yeah, she said that's one of their most important. That's the game she wants. After losing to them.
That's right.
But no, NSIC, we'll have a piece coming out tomorrow so people can dig into a bit of just looking at all the games coming up, a little bit of highlighting some of these programs. And we'll eventually, the next time we talk, we'll dig into a few more of these. I'm interested to see. We'll be,
that's great.
See who stands out, who who gets any results. I really am interested to see what Crookston does. They, by the way, in their next 2 games, they play a little bit easier games before it gets into the NSIC. But Crookston next plays one of the games is at Jamestown. Jamestown's a team they beat in an exhibition last year. So in a year when they didn't win, they did beat Jamestown last year in the preseason.
Well, and Jamestown soon to be NSIC member too.
Yeah, so they play at them, and then I'm missing what the other game is, but I think it might be Upper Iowa. But so I'm interested to see if they'll continue to get these results. Golden Eagles, let's go. 6 credits from your institution,
baby.
Paved the way for
college composition, college calc. What else did I get from there?
I just did history.
History maybe too. Some quick hits to wrap it up now that we've talked about our college credits from college and the schools.
22 years ago.
As a reminder, the US U20s, Maddie Deline and the US Youth National Team play at 4:30 today against Korea in the semis of the U20 World Cup. They had a miracle comeback win against Germany and then won in penalties.
That Maddie started. She sent in the cross where they got the first goal back.
Yeah, Maddie continues to be just a really, really impactful player for them. Korea was really strong, 3-0 in group play, 17 goals for, 2 against. But yeah, Japan and Netherlands in the other semi. The tournament play is absolutely nuts. The quality of play is absolutely nuts. We focused a ton on the Gophers this week. That's because they wrapped up non-conference. St. Thomas still has a non-conference game to go. They're playing at Marquette on Thursday at 5. So you actually could watch that and the Gopher game both on Thursday. They won't overlap. Mm-hmm. And then next week we'll do a deeper dive on St. Thomas once they've wrapped up non-conference. DC Power plays at Spokane Zephyr at 4 p.m. on Sunday in the first sort of USL Super League, like Minnesota matchup. So Katie Duong with DC will play at Spokane where Jenny Vetter suits up. They've both been seeing minutes the last couple games. Shout out to Mimi Iden, who I will get on for a show for sure. She led her team in scoring in Iceland. I think 17 goals in a short Icelandic season, which is absolutely just
nice.
Rip City crazy stuff. And then I don't know that we had seen, or maybe we hadn't posted, that Tiana Harris last year played in Paris in the French league. She is in Portugal, I think, on the same team as Morgan Stone. So based on Instagram. So fun to see them over there.
Right on. Going to open up the bar. We'll talk to you guys soon. And by the way, Matt, I'll tell you off air, I talked to a player who said if not for injury, they would have been maybe on the DC Super League team.
There we go, baby. All right. Well,
more Minnesotans in the mix.
Mark's opening up the Black Cart. Go watch some games if you want there. I'm sure we'll find some way to throw the U20s on.
Yeah, we will.
At 4:30 there too. Maybe out on the patio. Who knows? But thanks so much for joining us, guys.